This conference will now be recorded.
We got one couple that couldn't make it tonight, so that's why I'm recording it for them. So, this past week you did chapter 5, not a very tough one, huh? No? Did you find it interesting? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Did you find it boring? It was okay, huh? It was good. It was interesting. I think it's pretty it was interesting for me the first time around when I did it, in that to realize that there are some very important aspects of a marriage relationship. And you'd think that an intelligent person would know that those aspects exist, but sometimes you just are oblivious to things. And that's, I guess, would be a very good way of describing me. For a long time in the beginning in our marriage, I was oblivious to the way things were going. On page 46, for example, in your book, they had a little exercise there of what I'd love your top 5 priorities to be, and what I often feel your top 5 priorities are. Well, when Carla and I did this exercise the first time around, she wrote, for what I'd love your top 5 priorities to be, she had her, Carla, close to the top. And then the second group, what I often feel your top 5 priorities are, she was way at the bottom. And that was her feelings. And when I stopped to think about it, she was, excuse me, she was absolutely right. She was the least of my priorities. I mean, I was involved in community organizations. I was involved in the church. I was involved at work, and I had my son and I did a lot of things together. So Carla just took bottom priority. And I just realizing that helped me to put her up at the top, and that helped in our relationship, not treating her so badly. So moving on then to chat, we're going to move on. We're going to skip to chapter 8 on page 77. Chapter 8 is entitled Being Free from Emotional Closeness, and the first paragraph says, you've seen the headlines blazing that our schools are in crisis. You've heard our educators bemoan that the fact that Johnny can't read, can't spell, can't do math. But one headline you won't see, because few people recognize the problem, is that Johnny can't feel. Sorry, I got frog in my throat. Let me get a quick glass of water. I'll be right back.
Just like on my leg.
Okay, that's better, I think, huh? I don't sound so gravelly. So this chapter then is about feelings. And so it's going to be a relatively short session tonight because there's really not a whole lot to it except for one very, very, very important thing. Let's see, just double check. Yeah, just the one very important page. The most important page in this whole chapter is page 79. It says, because many of us miss the opportunity to develop a feeling vocabulary as children, and therefore entered marriage with little experience in the art of intimacy, we must develop new skills in this area. Developing the skill of emotional responding, which is the real key here, can help end our coping lifestyles and help us experience the joy of intimacy in our relationships. Simply stated, emotional responding means that when an emotion is expressed, probably most of the time by our wives, an emotional response is given in return. Emotion needs emotion. But quite often what we give as men is when our spouses share an emotion with us is we'll give them logic in response, or we'll give them facts, or we'll give them criticism, complaints, or excuses. I remember this class, this particular chapter, sharing this chapter with several couples in a church setting here in Carson City a few years back. And they went home, did their homework, and on the way back from there to the class the following week, one of the wives shared with her husband a feeling. Now, this particular man, still to this day, has a very hard time of sharing his feelings. I think he's somewhere in the neighborhood of 78, 79, something like that, 78, 79 years old. And his attitude, unfortunately, is that you can't teach an old dog new tricks, which I totally disagree with because I was an old dog at the age of 50 when my life changed and I learned a lot of new things and how to treat my wife. So anyway, she shares a feeling with him and he pauses as he's driving down the road and he looks out the window and he sees the mountains and he says, there's sure a lot of snow left on the mountains. Now that is what you would call neglect. Totally disregard your partner's feelings is what he did, and he didn't know how to handle dealing with her feelings, and so he just totally neglected them, just totally ignored them. Other ways that are not so good of responding to an emotion are when we respond perhaps with logic or reasoning. Such was the case, for example, when I told you about that lady that my wife Carla felt had intentions towards me. Remember that? When Carla shared with me her feelings about that situation, I used a lot of logic and reasoning to try to convince her that her feelings were wrong. Did it do any good? Absolutely not. Because as that paragraph said, emotion needs emotion. Other things that your partner may receive when your partner shares an emotion with you is criticism. They've got an example there. You sure are being sensitive this week. I didn't think this date was going to be such a big deal. Your partner shares an emotion and you criticize him or her in return. Does that help? I don't think so in any way, shape, or form. Then on the next page, when your partner shares an emotion and receives a complaint in return. Well, I'm hurt too. We could have spent last weekend together. You went to your sister's instead. A complaint. And then the last one is neglect or complete lack of recognition. Recognition, which I told you about that one gentleman. He just said, can't we just drop it? I really don't want to discuss it anymore. Or he just totally ignored and said, I think I'll go pull the weeds, or isn't it great? There's a lot of snow on the mountains still. So this particular principle for us guys in particular is something that will help us stay out of a lot of trouble. Because sometimes when our partners express an emotion, we will give logic or reasoning, complaints, criticism, or neglect. Whereas if we turned around and responded to that emotion with an emotion, and I'll tell you how in just a second, and we covered this in the first week when we were talking about communication. The three ways that I shared with you at that time were, first of all, words of understanding, words of affirmation, or words of comfort. One of those three responses on our parts will be a whole lot better than the logic or reasoning, the criticism. Ladies, you can reinforce what I'm stating here by telling your guy, Mark is really right on, or this book is really right on. I don't want to hear logic or reasoning. I don't want to hear complaints. I don't want to hear criticism. I don't want you to just ignore me. When I share an emotion with you, I would like to see an emotion in return. Okay? And that's all there is to this chapter. I mean, it's just like I said, it just has the one principle in it. But it has, like the last chapter on page 88 through 91, a couple of things you're going to focus on this week. So the first thing you want to do before you do any of this chapter is go to page 88 through 91 and do all the exercises there and learn about courting and learn about respect and practice the exercises that it gives you there. You're going to practice courting all week. You're going to practice respecting all week. So once you've learned about courting and respecting, then you can go back and finish the rest of the chapter. So with that being said, especially since my voice is so weird tonight, by the way, 2 weeks from tonight, I am going to be up in Washington, but I will be able, hopefully, to have Wi-Fi, and we'll hopefully have the class. So we'll see what happens 2 weeks from tonight. Okay? Any thoughts, any questions about this chapter? Pretty simple, isn't it?
Yep.
But it really can keep us guys, in particular, out of a lot of trouble by responding with understanding, affirmation, or comfort. You like that idea, Tara? All right. Okay, well, then have a great evening, a great week, and we will see you again next week when we're going to go through a chapter that's really fun, in my opinion.
Uh-oh.
A little bit more involved than this week. Not so hard as chapters 3 and 4, but a lot of fun, in my opinion. So, see you next week. Have a good one. Don't work too hard. And